Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about how Nintendo may be combating the future AI invasion. Now that headline is a bit of a joke, but also I do think there is some truth to it. I think with the rise of generative AI, there are certain issues that will be impacting our society overall, but also specifically with game development, and that does include Nintendo. How will Nintendo handle these future challenges? Nintendo has recently spoken out on this, and many people have brought in their own interpretations. They've read some poor translations, and there's been a lot of discussion on this, but I think there's a lot of context that a lot of people haven't considered that make this conversation a bit more interesting. So today we're going to be getting into that and discussing Nintendo's overall strategy moving forward when it comes to generative AI. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now before getting into Nintendo's future strategy when it comes to generative AI, we should probably establish what is AI versus generative AI. Because AI has been around for a very long time, it's been used in so many different forms of technology, including video games. AI stands for artificial intelligence. Non-generative AI models perform computations based on input data, such as classifying an image or translating a text into another language, or in the case of video games. Say you approach a character on screen and you try to attack it. If it's a fighting game, that character will have an artificial intelligence. There will be programmed responses based off your inputs. It will know how to respond to you based off some pre-programming. Artificial intelligence. And so this is something that's very important to video games overall. And we've even seen in some games, like in fighting games, where there can't even be some sort of artificial learning that's going on, where the computer or NPCs adapt to your playstyle. But generative AI, which has become more of a bigger issue as of late, is not that. An example of generative AI is ChatGPT. So let me go ahead and read you this AI overview explaining ChatGPT and just generative AI. Yes, ChatGPT is a type of generative artificial intelligence. Generative AI is a broad field of algorithms that can create new content such as text, images, audio, code, simulations, and videos. ChatGPT is a tool that allows users to input prompts and receive human-like content created by AI. ChatGPT is trained on a large amount of textual data, which makes it more knowledgeable than other language models. It can help with content creation and information retrieval, and some say it could help speed up certain tasks. So the basic point here is that generative AI is essentially a form of artificial intelligence that has been trained to create new forms of data, media, information, programs, and a whole slew of other things that can feel almost human-like because it's learned based off a large pool of data. But where the issue can arise here is that this large pool of data can contain information that may be copyrighted material. And there's also a bit of an ethical debate as well, because you have a lot of people who are more creative-minded, artists. I've done art in the past, and when I see generative AI essentially looking at paintings and different things like this and then putting together its own image without any work, as someone who has made art in the past, and see how someone who doesn't have really any sort of background in art reproduce something with little to no effort, it's something that I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. And then there are plenty of other situations, like when there is a student who needs to write a paper and they rely on generative AI to write the entire paper for them so they can get by without actually having a proper understanding of the material or the ability to actually write said paper. And so with the rise of generative AI, there are a variety of both ethical and legal issues that need to be dealt with. But with some of the context presented, let's now get into what Nintendo has said recently. So here is the official English translation from the 84th Annual General Meeting of Shareholders Q&A. And question 4, they ask, efforts are underway to equip smartphones with AI, and it is expected that AI will become more prominent in everyday life. I'd like to hear about Nintendo's initiatives using AI. Furukawa. In the game industry, AI-like technologies have long been used, for example, to control the movements of opponent characters. So I believe that game development and AI technology have always had a close relationship. Generative AI, which is becoming a big topic recently, can be used in creative ways, but we recognize that it may also raise issues with intellectual property rights. We have decades of know-how in creating the best gaming experiences for our players. While we are open to utilizing technological developments, we will work to continue delivering value that is unique to Nintendo and cannot be created by technology alone. So what is Nintendo saying here? Because I've certainly seen some debate about this. Essentially what they're saying here is that they are keeping their eyes on developing technologies, and in the future it's possible that maybe they might use something like this. Currently, however, they are not utilizing generative AI, they are simply relying on their expertise of making wonderful games with all the creative talent they have under their umbrella. But this last line here I find interesting, where they say, "We will work to continue delivering value that is unique to Nintendo and cannot be created by technology alone." They are talking about how there are issues with intellectual property, and Nintendo being a company that is so cautious about their own intellectual property, it probably would be a little hypocritical to start using generative AI that could perhaps infringe on this. And there are issues of that, there are legal things, there's a lot of things of that we're still trying to sort out as a society here. But basically what Nintendo is saying is that at the heart of it, it's still going to be something created by people. It's still something that's going to be made by them that is genuine and unique and innovative and imaginative, and it's not just going to be a copy of something else or using a computer to create something that isn't made by a person at all. They may find ways to use generative AI to help out in certain ways, and I think there are some potential advantages with that. As long as they are cautious about the database that's being used, we can potentially move past this issue of infringing upon intellectual property and copyright and all of that, and we can see a scenario where perhaps within games, generative AI can lead to some very unique interactions. Imagine a game world where the different non-playable characters, through generative AI, can learn and have unique conversations with you and even have unique interactions that help to lead to a more organic feeling immersive world. There's a lot of potential there, but the manner in which it's executed, we have to be cautious about that, I'd say, and that seems to be the philosophy Nintendo will be going forward with in the future. At some point they may find a use for the technology, but ultimately it still needs to be something that is made by people, and not as a crutch for pseudo-creative projects here. But there is a lot of pressure right now for different companies in the game industry to take advantage of generative AI. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad or good thing, it kind of depends on how it's used, I would say. But the advantages of generative AI can expedite game development. Game development is becoming longer and more expensive, resource intensive, and we've been seeing so many different developers getting laid off over the last few years. This is becoming a serious issue. So looking for ways to improve the game development cycle, if generative AI can play a role in that, I think that's something that should be considered, but again, it needs to be handled cautiously and appropriately. Something else that was brought up during the Q&A that I think is actually pretty relevant here has to do with how Nintendo will be handling these more strenuous development cycles. So here for question 11, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, released last year, was the first new 2D Mario game in 11 years. It seems that software development for Nintendo Switch is taking longer than in the past. In terms of the gaming experience, I think it's important for players to have a series of memorable experiences at a young age. So it would be nice to see short development cycles and games released regularly, even if they're not major game titles, so young people have more opportunities to play games. And Furukawa responds by saying, "Game development today is more prolonged, more complex, and more advanced. That is unavoidable. To deal with this, we are continually expanding our development resources and making the necessary investments." Takahashi, as hardware advances, it is inevitable that software development takes longer, but I believe we are succeeding in our efforts to shorten development cycles, for example by steadily improving the development environment following the release of the hardware. Whether titles take a long time or a short time to develop, we want to make games that are fun. It is not as if Super Mario Bros. Wonder was under continuous development for nearly a decade. There is a long gap between the release of the previous title, New Super Mario Bros. U, and the current title because various initiatives and studies were made in the meantime. Going forward, we aim to continue with a variety of new offerings, and we hope you look forward to them. And then here, Takahashi Tezuka, after we finished Super Mario Bros. Wonder, I was reminded 11 years had gone by since the previous game. However, that doesn't mean we did nothing during that time. We developed several new Mario games such as Mario Maker series and the 3D Mario series. To reiterate, Nintendo's creative philosophy, first we think about creating entertainment that has never been done before, regardless of whether it's a Mario series game or not. Then we think about how we can make it fun for everyone so they fall in love with Nintendo. All of our games involving Mario, not just Mario Bros. Wonder, are created with the goal of encouraging as many people as possible to enjoy them. As for upcoming new titles, some will take time to develop and others will be made in a short period of time. I hope you look forward to our new offerings. So they mentioned a few very interesting things here. They talk about how they have worked to shorten development cycles by steadily improving their development environment following the release of hardware. And I think this is actually a point that maybe some people will be glossing over here, because I remember during the GameCube days, during the Wii U days, there was a lot of talk of third-party developers struggling a lot with the unique hardware of the GameCube and also the Wii U. But then you look at something like the Nintendo Switch, where Nintendo partnered with Nvidia and they used a stock Tegra X1 chip. A lot of developers understood this a lot more easily. Making games through the Unreal Engine on Nintendo Switch is easier to get done than prior Nintendo consoles. And we've even seen a lot of Nintendo games being made with Unreal Engine. And so I just think there's a lot of different little things Nintendo's been putting together when it comes to the development environment that is certainly making it easier to put games together. But also Nintendo does have a lot of different partner developers. You look at the games that are coming out for this holiday, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Mario and Luigi Brothership, Super Mario Party Jamboree. These games are being made in conjunction with their partners and not totally just their own internal studios. And then we also look at how Nintendo's focusing on one platform at a time now. We have the Nintendo Switch. We don't have like the Wii U and 3DS at the same time. And so Nintendo can focus on having a steady lineup of games for just one system, which is a lot easier to do versus when you're spreading yourself thin on two. But in regards to AI, there's something here that they said I found really interesting. First, we think about creating entertainment that has never been done before. And so I think this is a core part of Nintendo philosophy. When they are working on making games, they're bringing all their creative people in together and brainstorming, coming up with different ideas, and going through a process of finding what works and creating something new and exciting. As they discuss here with Mario Wonder, there were thousands of ideas that went into Mario Wonder. The game was made without a deadline in mind. Their goal was to make something that hadn't been quite done before. Here in this Ask Developer series for Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Tezuka said this: I was already thinking about what kind of Mario game we should make next when we were developing Super Mario Maker 2. At the time, some journalists and players were saying that Super Mario Maker had eliminated the need for another 2D Mario game. But I kept saying that the next Mario game would be completely different from Super Mario Maker, so there was no need to worry. In hindsight, those kinds of sentiments may have been what motivated me to come up with ideas for this game. And so what I find interesting about this is that I remember myself thinking, man, it's going to be really challenging to follow up with a brand new, original feeling 2D Mario game after something like the Mario Maker series, where they basically threw all the tools in one spot for making a Mario game, and there were so many different crazy ideas in that. I really wondered how they might be able to do something different, but they took their time, they spent many years, and they were able to put something very unique together with Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Something I love about the Ask Developer series from Nintendo is that they are these rare opportunities where Nintendo allows us to get insight from their developers in this modern day about the process of their game making. I take a look at the one they had for Pikmin 4, and they talked about the process of coming up with Ochi and how there were different things they wanted to put together, and at one point they were thinking about it being a Bulborb, but eventually it evolved into the Space Dog Ochi, which really ended up improving the flow and fun of the gameplay of that Dandori style that Pikmin 4 is all about. And so ultimately what I'm getting at here is that the philosophy of game development at Nintendo is about coming up with new fun ideas to improve their game series or create new game series. And in this era of rising development costs where a lot of developers are sticking to tried and true things, in other words, less creative, less original projects, and even resorting to generative AI in some cases to reduce the workload and expedite the development process, while depending on how it's used, it can be a good thing, it can also be something that really takes away from our progression of new ideas, and it's more so just a recycling of old ideas. Now again, I recognize that generative AI can be used to create some new cool things, but it depends on how it's used. Now, I've seen some conversation about how Nintendo is already going to use generative AI, and what they're saying here is kind of misleading. I've seen even some people suggesting that they've already been using AI in, say, something like Endless Ocean Luminous.
Salvage found. Well done spotting it.
But from what I can tell of the narrator, I don't think it's generative AI. I think it's just something that sounds a little robotic, like, I don't know, a GPS or Siri, which, by the way, are voices of real people. They're actual voice actors, and they simply sound that way because that's by design. As we talked about earlier, generative AI is something very different. Generative AI is algorithms that pull from a large bank of information and have learned how to create new concepts and ideas from that pool of information. And we haven't seen Nintendo do something quite like that yet, so what they're saying is consistent. And so ultimately, how Nintendo is going to be handling the future of AI, it's pretty much what they've been doing already. When it comes to simple AI, as has been used for many years, decades in video games, that will remain the same. But when it comes to generative AI, they'll keep their eyes on it, and if they find a way to implement it that doesn't take away from their unique creative process to create fun new experiences, then they'll do it, and that wouldn't be a problem. Generative AI is a tool that I think has some serious potential, but is also something that we have to be cautious in how it's used. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.